going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Gravity Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris. Thank you for choosing to tune in today. Hey, folks, we're keeping this conversation going. How do you stay grounded in a world full of noise and chaos? What are your foundations? What are those core values, principles that help guide your decision making? That helps speak into your life and let you know when you're meeting the mark and when you're not. That's been the reality of my life. There's sometimes I'm not meeting my own expectation of myself. And what is that expectation? Well, I think your core values are going to be a huge piece of that, at least if you're like me. Today on the show, we're going to be speaking with Marotta. Mike is a prior Air Force member, retired San Antonio police officer, and now executive director at Warriors Heart, the hat I'm wearing today on the podcast. Mike has some amazing stories of loving the job. He has some impactful stories of not loving the job. And then eventually the story of him leaving the job earlier than he expected. If you know anything about my story, folks, you know that me and Mike have a lot of similarities. The details are a little bit different, but him and I walked a similar path and really asking that question of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And the reality that if you are a first responder, you are a leader. If you are a dispatcher, a firefighter, EMS, law enforcement, probably in emergency medicine, you're going to fall into this category as well. Military veteran, you are a leader. You have a lot of valuable skills, and there's a lot you can do. And I hear a lot of law enforcement officers kind of have a mindset of, I don't know if there's anything more I can do. I don't know if my skills are transferable. And I just want you to hear they are, and Mike's going to talk about that on today's episode. Folks, you know I always like to talk about some kind of organization first. And I think on the day that I'm interviewing the executive director of Warriors Heart, Virginia, it's only appropriate for me to talk about Warriors Heart. Warriors Heart is a substance abuse and co-occurring injury recovery center. So we're talking, they focus on substance abuse, but they're also going to deal with post-traumatic stress, going to deal with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. They're going to be working on both of those issues at the same time. They're located in San Antonio, Texas, and then the center that Mike leads over in Virginia, and they only accept clients from the Warrior class. They only accept clients from those different jobs that I just mentioned a little bit ago. And it's not like this white-walled, padded room. This is more like a ski lodge type of setting for healing. Absolutely remarkable organization, folks. You've heard me talk about it before. The links are going to be down in the show notes. Please check out Warriors Heart today. Even if you don't think you're going to need it, check it out so that when a friend or family member or coworker needs it, you are armed with that resource. With that, folks, let's get into this interview with Mike Marotta. Mike Marotta, welcome to the Gravity Podcast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Finally got to make it happen.
I know. You and I have been connecting on LinkedIn for over a year, I think, just kind of private messaging each other and commenting on each other's stuff.
Yeah, stalking each other. I hear you. Yeah, I got you.
That's exactly what it is. And both of you're in my prior lines of work. That is considered stalking, at least if it's unwanted. And for the audio only listeners, they're not going to see that you and I both have beautiful beards. So, I mean, people are going to have to get on YouTube. And honestly, I don't care about the YouTube piece. Like, people get on it, don't get on it. I don't watch a lot of podcasts. I'm just being real with everyone. Yeah. I am a audio podcast guy. But for those of you that do want to see the beautiful beards that Mike and I bring to the table, I mean,
yeah, man, no doubt about it. Irish Santa Claus and a regular Santa Claus. I don't
know. I haven't had to. Now you have a beautiful head of hair as well. I haven't had to worry about hair on my head since my late teens, early 20s. And so I'm enjoying this season of life where like there's wash, there's conditioner, there's balm, there's beard oil. I mean, I walk away from the bathroom and I smell amazing. I smell like I was out like chopping wood or something.
Yeah, and I got to worry about combing the stuff on top of my head as well as on my face. I know it's a burden to bear, man, with this hair.
It's a rough burden to bear to have a beautiful head of hair, you know.
I got to shampoo it. I know. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, for folks that haven't heard of you before, do you mind giving an introduction to the listeners?
Yeah, man, absolutely. First, yeah, thanks again for having me. I'm super thrilled to be able to chat with you a little bit about me. I'm going to start where I always start. I am a husband of 24 years. I have two sons, 23 and 13. In fact, something kind of cool, maybe we'll get into this later, is my 23-year-old is actually one of our chefs here at Warriors Heart, Virginia.
I did
And
not know that.
we could talk more about that because that was a beautiful journey for him. And so it's cool to work with him. I'm a prior Air Force veteran. I served as a loadmaster on C-5As. If you know, you know. So if I'm hard of hearing, forgive me. The airframe took a lot of my ears from me. Um, and then I served in the San Antonio Police Department for 17 years. Uh, Notice I didn't say 20. I didn't quite get to the retirement, and we can certainly get into that and the why behind it. While a police officer, I served in a number of roles as a patrolman. My last probably 5 or 6 years, I spent on the behavioral health unit, and I was doing all the co-responding stuff. That's really big right now. Is
Yeah.
we were going out with mental health providers, and San Antonio PD was really great in pioneering that, and they were one of the first agencies to, excuse me, require that we're all mental health certified. So I was doing that work. I was also doing crisis negotiations, all the barricaded subject stuff. I was working with a lot of high utilizers, and I remember, Chris, I had the moment where we went to a call, and I went. A lot of folks wanted what we had to offer, but a lot of folks didn't. And I said, I know a population that absolutely wants us to show up at their door with all the resources and tools. And that's our own people, other San Antonio police officers. And at the time, wellness and resiliency, I was starting to hear these words. They were kind of buzzwords at the time.
Yeah.
Now they're absolutely kind of the way of being and doing across law enforcement. But at the time, we weren't doing it. We had two psychologists for a department of right around 23 to 2,400 sworn law enforcement. So sizable,
Yeah.
not enough.
No.
And one day I said, you know what? I'm going to do the inward face. And I was working Joe Smaro. I don't know if you know Joe Smaro,
I do.
Solution Point. Me, Joe Smaro, if you know Ernie Stevens.
Don't know
Um,
your
yeah, Ernie's another. Joe and Ernie were in the documentary Crisis Cops on
Oh,
HBO.
yeah. Yeah.
So me and Ernie were partners. Joe, we all worked together. Can you imagine that? Me, Joe, and Ernie. It was a wild time. But Joe was like, "Hey, we need to start talking about mental health." He left the department to pursue his endeavors, and so then I said, "You know what? I'm going to take this next level. Let's go." And really started to have the big conversations and create space for our own mental health. And you know how I was doing it is the way we all know I was being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Here I was in front of 75, 80 police officers and sharing like deeper parts of myself. And everybody was like, whoa, by the way, I'm going through that. And yeah, so that's how it all began. Subsequently, all this journey I was on, my own personal journey with my wife, led me out of the career field. There's some other things in between there, but yeah, here I am with you on this podcast in Central Virginia at Warriors Heart.
Wow, this is going to be a lot of fun, brother. Yeah, so many things for us to talk about. And initially, when you started talking, I was like, okay, we're going to talk about Air Force. Air Force is great. I'm Air Force vet. I love it. But again, like I said to you at the beginning, if there's something we need to talk about, bring it up. But where
Yeah.
I wanted to start maybe is the glory days. Because here's the thing. I left the job earlier than expected as well. I didn't hit that magic number 20 either. And I don't want the young folks that are doing the job right now, who are doing great work out there for our country. I don't want them hearing this thing. The job's going to screw you up. You're going to leave broken. Uh, it it could, right? I mean, look at football players, right? Like, yeah, if you
Yeah.
do that job, you could leave seriously injured. It's a rough sport. Being
Yeah.
a cop is a rough sport, but it's also, I think, one of the most remarkable jobs you can ever do. So let's
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about the glory days, early days, San Antonio Police Department. I used to live there in San Antonio. Just talk about your hair on fire and you loving doing the job. What was that like?
Oh man, I was like all rookie cops. So there's an additional story there, Chris, and there's an additional path there.
Bring it.
I'm a second generation police officer. My father did 33 years at the San Antonio PD. Look, me and my dad were cool now. He wasn't around for most of my life. We're good, and I want to make that very clear. But my dad was kind of like, I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be a policeman. And then, life took me through these kind of being a young dad, being young and married, and getting out of the Air Force, and I needed a job. So I took law enforcement. I didn't have the romantic, I saw a cop one day as a kid, and I knew I wanted to do that. That wasn't my path. But
Okay.
what can tell you is I freaking loved being a young cop. I broke out on the south side of San Antonio on 61 and 62 side. Those are kind of the sections down in South. And I mean, we were doing it all, man. All the capers you can imagine. Like I want to be assigned to that. I want to go do this thing, and I loved it. But then, very early in my career, things started to turn because the job, it's fun, but it's also incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And so, kind of a culminating thing for me was my best friend, Brandy, was shot in the line of duty with her FTO and another officer. And at the time, Brandy was my friend. I didn't even know her name. I didn't know who she was. She was just the new boot cop who was on her rides. And long story there. But that's when I started to go, oh man, I don't know that I'm prepared for what this, like the reality of this job. Not long after that, I transferred to the downtown bike patrol unit. And then I kind of fell back in love again. This was about year 3, more or less. And I mean, my beat was downtown,
The
you know,
Riverwalk.
the Riverwalk. Yes, man. Like the biggest part of our role down there was bar breakout. So it was like between the hours of 12 and 3:30, because we worked 10-hour shifts, 5:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m. Like that's what we did. It was like bar brawls. It was fights. It was, dealing with intoxicated people, um, parades, all the big major events. Just, yeah, we were loving it, man. We were the kings of downtown. We got paid to ride a bike. Like as a kid, who didn't love to ride their bike? And we were getting paid to do it. We had a little squad, me and some of my best friends, still to this day, downtown, kicking butt and just having a good time. So it is those are good times. I was reflecting on them the other day. A good friend of ours passed away recently who worked down on bikes. And yeah, like we're transitioning seasons in life, and like there's a great story there with James. Rest in peace, James. But just good times, man. Good times. I love to reflect on them.
Yeah. Is it worth sharing that story with James?
So James passed away about a week ago now, and here's what I remember about James Flores. Great, great guy, policeman's policeman. He lived downtown, and I remember he'd get off work, and then he was a resident, and this guy was like, the king of downtown. Everybody knew him. He knew everybody. All the old timers knew this guy, and James retired probably maybe 10 years ago. I might be getting that wrong, but I was early in my career when James left. And he had a good friend of his, another police officer named Al, San Antonio police officers, who passed away recently. And look, man, here's the reality of it. James got back into alcohol and drank himself to death.
Mm.
Body shut down. And so, what a great guy. Way too young, aren't they always, right? Way too young, in the struggle, in his addiction, and like what I'm hoping is that his life, beyond what he did for me, taking care of me as a young boot cop, like people learn from his death, like what we're dealing with, the career, all that comes with addiction, the difficulty of just life. It's very real, and it can kill you. And we're dealing with life and death here. You know, yeah. It's a little bit about James.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yes, sir.
Hey, in a bit, I want to get to some of these larger solutions that I know that you're a part of. But one thing that stood out was you were at this 3 year mark from being a patrol officer to being a bicycle officer, and you said that when you transitioned, you kind of fell back in love with the job, and that really resonated with me because I had a few of those throughout my career, and I remember a Sage sergeant. In fact, I just saw him the other night telling me that, hey, Chris, you're going to have these times in your career where you need someone just to give you a good talk and to kind of reframe your outlook, reframe your mindset. And I experienced that. Can you recall, was it just the change, or was there something that you implemented, or a mentor stepped in when you had those times in your career, kind of in the middle range of the career? Because again, I want to eventually build up to some of the more structured solutions for our folks. What did you do to help transition your mindset? Or, yeah, what was it that helped transition from I'm in a rut to wow, I feel like I have a fresh breath of air now?
Yeah. I can't point to like a specific strategy. What I can tell you is the change of scenery. Absolutely. And then something that I also noticed throughout my careers is like each substation was like its own little subculture within the greater culture. And depending what that is, you will take on the characteristics of those patrol officers there in the district, in the area, maybe in your neighboring district. So you're always making, and you kind of become a version of them and they become a version of you.
Yeah.
And I think for me, going to bike patrol, I transferred over there with two or three other guys. We were all very similar points in our career. We were kind of young, hungry, idealistic, still like wanting to go out and hump calls and freaking run warrants and like do all the things. And I think we were able to develop some good friendships. My buddy Gus was my best bud. And that definitely changed. Like, oh, wow, here's a guy that now I wasn't in a district. We were working the same, we were together. And so that friendship and kind of some of his viewpoints and his family background, it influenced me in a really positive way. Granted, I was still, I could be kind of a dirtbag sometimes. I was not always great. But yeah, friendships and the change of scenery, changing the culture that I was kind of housed within, changed things for me. And bikes was a cool place to be at that time, and I think
Wow.
it influenced me.
Yeah. What I hear you saying, and I want you to call me out if I'm wrong on this,
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what I hear you saying is just that the power that we have on each other, meaning I can, there can be some bigger issues going on in maybe a larger law enforcement agency or a smaller one, I guess. However, if we have trusting relationships on our squad, on our team, we can make it we can make this a positive environment. Like you and I have control over deciding that this is going to be positive and how contagious that is with each other.
Yeah. The power of influence, man, is a very real thing. All it takes is one person, two people to change an entire culture
Yeah.
and to shift the value system of a substation, of a group, of a unit, wherever you're at. All it takes is one. but the power of influence is very real, and we all have that ability. I think sometimes we go, and I know I said this as a patrol officer, because you're at the bottom rung in a greater system, and you go, how can I change a thing? What am I supposed to do? Man, you have the power. Like, it's within every single one of us to influence our beat partner, to influence the unit, the roll call that we attend. Like, we all have something to say, and a
Yeah.
way that we can shift that mindset. So
Yeah.
yeah, the power of influence is real, man. I love that you brought that up.
I remember in high school, well, you inspired it, first of all, brother, from you sharing that story. But I remember in high school on the weight room, it was the leg press machine. And up on the wall above the leg press machine, it said, and I may get this wrong, but the more and more I live life, the more and more convinced I am by the impact of attitude. Life is 90% or 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react to it. And
Oh
I
yeah,
have just found that way. I was deployed, or not deployed, but permanent change of station to Korea, away from my wife and my 11-month-old daughter. And I had the opportunity to go there and be pissed off. And I went there because they needed combat arms instructors. And I
yeah,
get there and they don't need combat arms instructors, so I get assigned to flight, to security forces patrol. And so I'm like, really? I had to leave my family, and I had a great time.
yeah,
I was away from my family, and that part wasn't great. But some of the relationships that I developed there, and then the way God, the follow-on base after that, the way God just orchestrated so many things. And I'm saying God because you can only say that it was luck and chance for so long, folks. Eventually, uh, you have to recognize that things are being done on purpose. And so, I'm getting off on a large rabbit trail, so I'm going to
it's all
redirect us
good.
back if that's all right.
Yeah, yeah, it's all good.
Hey, I want to get to the 17-year mark, but before we do that, talk about the impact of this job on the family, because you've been married to your wife before you did this job. So she got all of it. She got the start. She saw that young 1, 2, 3 year cop. She saw you when you got assigned to bike patrol and a shift in your attitude. What was the impact on the family life?
Man, incredibly negative. I'll tell you that. I mean, law enforcement, you're working odd hours, you're working long hours, and then one day they introduce you to off-duty jobs, and you go, "Wow, you mean I can make more money, and all I got to do is sit in my car or stand here?" And so then that becomes the thing, and then you start to make financial decisions based on these things, and it leads to just one kind of big mess. But here's the other thing that I discovered uh, further down the road was, yes, law enforcement, fire, just all these jobs, the military, they offer a really kind of good off ramp to say, well, I'm messed up because of this thing. But what I discovered was I was already a mess before I ever became a police officer. I was already a bad husband. I was already kind of not being a present dad. I was already there. And then law enforcement for me just kind of accelerated it. And because my wife and I were so incredibly disconnected at that point in our relationship, it was convenient. We would tell people like, oh, we're ships in the night. I go in when she's getting home, and it works for us. The fact of the matter was it didn't work for us. I was getting my, adrenaline and dopamine fixes at work, going to fights and doing all these things. And the fact of the matter was, like, I was pulling back on the things that actually mattered in my life. That was my wife and my son at the time, and then we had our second son in 2010. But yeah, man, it was a really negative impact for sure. So there's that. Yeah.
Thanks for being so open, brother, because
Sure.
it's not easy stuff to share. I mean, you used a pretty big word there. I was a bad husband or a bad dad, and those are things that have carried with me. I use a bigger word. I failed. Those are
Yeah.
that's the narrative in my mind. And I wasn't a failure. That was the narrative. I am a failure as a dad. I'm a failure as a husband because of when I showed up with these big emotions and overreacted to things at the house. But here's the reality: is I wasn't a bad dad. I wasn't a failure. Sometimes I showed up with bad parenting, and sometimes I showed up with bad husbanding, right? But I wasn't bad, and I don't know. I've had to work a lot through that because of the fact that I was carrying around these labels and beating myself down. And my wife, while she wanted me to show up better, she wasn't beating me down. You know what I'm saying? It was like, but
Yeah.
so at what point did you realize? Because again, you mentioned, and I don't know the way it is in Texas, but I'll tell you in Washington State, 20 years is the magical number. If you
Yeah.
hit 20 years, you can retire and you will get cost of living increases on your retirement for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
If you retire at 19 years, 11 months and 364 days, 1 day short of 20, no cost of living increases through your retirement. You still get to draw your retirement, whatever you paid in, but just
Yeah.
no cost of living increases. And that literally, I did the math at like 10 years of retirement. I think it was like hundreds, maybe even getting close to $1,000. So what caused you to need to leave?
Ooh, good question. So I left the department in 2022, early 2022. I'll back up from there to December 13th of 2019. Um, that was the day that my beautiful wife called me out on some bad decisions I had made, and I think we can all kind of glean what decisions those were. There was a moment that day, a couple of things. One, I'll get spiritual because clearly we're both believers. Uh, I heard God say, "Man, that's not your wife, that's mine, and
Mm,
you have not stewarded and cared for her." And my heart sank. The second part of that, December 13th of 2019, standing there in our restroom in San Antonio, I had the thought of I became my father,
mm,
the very guy that I swore I'd never become. I've become him, and it broke my heart.
yeah.
And I knew I had to do something better. So my wife showed me an incredible act of grace. I don't call it mercy because it was grace because it was unearned, and she didn't have to give it to me. And she said, "We're going to get through this." And I was like, "All right, we're going to do it." That sent us on a cool path too, Chris. Like that's another side of it. My wife and I teaching marriage classes and doing all these things. But I started working on me. And through working on me, I started to show up different at the department. I started to show up different in how I was responding at calls. And then it led me into the wellness and resiliency piece. And I was sharing these things that I was like going through. And everybody was just like, oh my gosh, the power of vulnerability, right? Again, the power of influence. People were, let's talk about this. Like, hey, man, I'm going through something similar. And it just like it exploded. Um, and I also realized, man, I there's something bigger for me. There's a calling on my life right now. I don't know what it is, but there's something happening here. And I remember my wife used to say that, oh, I feel like, something good's gonna happen to you. And then bam, 2022. I was involved. There was a situation involving an officer, and I'm not going to get into the details of that. But here's what I can tell you. The very last thing that I did, Chris, as a San Antonio police officer was get another police officer into Warriors Heart in Bandera. That was the last thing I did as a police officer was get this guy in, and the guy is thriving. The guy has since left the department. The guy opened his own business and moved. The guy has had a child. Like this man is thriving because of his sobriety and because of the decisions he and I made to get him into treatment.
Yeah.
But there was some bureaucracy, and it wasn't. They said I didn't handle it appropriately. Again, not going to go there. But I was transferred off of my unit, out of my job, and I went. I did what all police officers do. Man, this sucks. Well, I guess I'm just gonna, embrace the suck. And that's kind of what I went with. And then I said, I sat and I processed, and I took the rest of the week off. And then I said, I think I'm going to leave the department. And my wife, because we were working on our relationship and because we had rebuilt and because we were in that space again, she was prepared with, you should go for it. I support you. Man, you take that decision 5 years prior, she would have said, are you crazy? You can't leave. And she said, leave. I got you. We got each other. And I walked away from the department. No plan, no job lined up. I didn't have something coming. Like, I just left and knew God was going to put me right where he wanted me when the time was right. And that's how all that went down, man. Yeah.
Wow. And I'm just going to make a proclamation here. And yeah, I'm not going to preface it anymore. If you are a Christ follower and you and your spouse are seeking God's will in your life, I have personally never heard God's audible voice. Chris, this is God. Never heard it. But I have heard his voice through the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
I have heard his voice through other people, believers and atheists. I have had God speak truth to me. And I'll tell you what, when your wife tells you, honey, go, when all common sense would say, stay, you got 2.5 years left. Just, we can do anything. What did the military teach you? You can do anything for a deployment cycle. You could do anything for 2.5 years. And instead, your wife, and later my wife, looked at you and said, go, we will figure it out. And I just say that because God has conditioned your heart and your wife's heart and prepared you, I believe, for that moment in 2022, where you guys were both on the same sheet of music. And it was like, this is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, 100%. And yes, you're right. Like, it wasn't like God interrupted our conversation and said, hey, wait a second. But it was like this, it was this pull on your heart. It's something deeper and it's salient, and you're like, you feel it in your heart. And I knew, like, man, my bad, right? Like, God, I'm being called out right now and I got to do something different. What I didn't know is that he was preparing us for what would eventually be my departure from the career field. Because I, like so many people, I'm never going to leave. I'm going to retire. And law enforcement officers, I'm going to speak to law enforcement officers. All of them, all of us are so miserable in our jobs, but so unwilling to leave. And I always thought that was interesting. I'm like, I can't leave. I hate this. It's terrible. And just like, we're going to hang here. Like, we're going to stay in it. And then I said, what if we took that same principle and applied it to our families and our marriages? Like, I can't leave this thing. I got to stay in this no matter what. It sucks right now, but I'm going to hang in because it matters and because it's important and because there's a reward at the end of it. I saw guys that were like unwilling to leave their careers, but so willing to walk away from their families and their marriages. And it just didn't ever make sense to me.
That's a powerful statement, brother. And unfortunately, we resemble that. I'm talking about as a career, we resemble that. And wow. So you exit the career. It's 2022. You said you didn't have a plan. You just felt like this is what you all were supposed to do. Yeah. You did it. What happened next?
So this is really cool. So I leave and I decide I'm going to take a couple months off because I got, my leave, accumulated leave banks, my muster pay. Like, we're good financially. We knew we kind of had this target. My wife's like, take a couple months off and just take it off. Of course I did. Like, I started like getting anxious. Oh my God, what's going to happen? What am I going to do? And then I had a chance call with Joe Willis from First Help. Are you familiar with First Help?
I am, yes.
Yeah. So Joe Willis was the chief learning officer. He was their trainer. And I had a call with him one day, just like, hey, man, what's going on, brother? I'd love to do buddy checks. And we talked and he goes, hey, man, I got this part-time gig. We're developing this paid position at First Help to be a training coordinator. And I was like, oh, my ears perked up. We met, I interviewed. They gave me the job. cool thing, I got to work with Joe. I'd seen him train. Wow, he is an incredible facilitator. I got to work with him, Steve Huff, and then of course my favorite, Karen Solomon. Like here I was, like in meetings with Karen Solomon, and Karen always like, "Oh, Mike, my fanboy." I was always our joke because I just was such an incredible fan of what she did for the
Yeah.
career field. And here I
Yes.
was meeting weekly with Joe Willis, Karen, Steve Huff, and that's what I did. I did their grant-funded training through FirstNet AT&T. They had some generous grant funding, and I went out and called agencies and said, "Hey, who wants to train in responder readiness?" It was essentially a suicide prevention class, but we didn't call it that because I don't know that there's actually a suicide prevention that you can do. But what you can do is create a ready force. And so that's what I did. I traveled all over the country and I taught and I facilitated and I was absolutely loving it and having a great time. Of course, travel, it wears on you a little bit. Um, and then one day, I can take it into how Warrior's Heart happened. I'm working for First Help. Things are going great. And then I was back in Texas, and me and a buddy of mine, Garrett, were having lunch with Matt Hughes, the former UFC badass, 9-time champ. We're friends, and we had lunch, and then we went to visit Warrior's Heart, and that was May 23rd of 2023. And I was there with Lisa Lannon, one of the founders, and my relationship goes back a long way with them because of the number of people that I got there. And yeah, Matt was, talking to people, taking pictures. Everybody was freaking out because like Matt Hughes was walking around the campus, and Lisa offers me this job, and I laughed at her. I was like, "What? Like you're crazy." And then I was circled back and I went, "Hey, were you being serious?" And she goes, "I'm serious if you're serious." And yeah, here I am, man. And yeah, like what an amazing organization to give me a chance, and First Help as well, to take a chance on a guy that they didn't know. Um, they just opened doors, and Joe Willis is still somebody that I value, his friendship, his mentorship. I learned so much from that guy. And then Karen, and the work she's doing. So yeah, it's been a cool journey, man.
I'm really hearing a lot of purpose. This post law enforcement journey that
Yeah.
you've been on. I hear a couple things. I hear purpose and I hear hope for the
Yeah.
people like you just mentioned a little bit ago. People feel like they're almost in prison for the
Yeah.
job. And the reality is no, you're not. You get to choose. And I just hear hope in that. And then, like I said, I hear purpose. After you left, you've had a couple jobs that are very purposeful.
Yeah. Law enforcement officers, all first responders that are listening to this, like I want to encourage them. Their career fields are preparing them for what's next.
Mm,
Preparing them because there's an entire population out there who is like, oh my God, we need to hire first responders. They know leadership, they know presence, they know how to take command, they know how to control a scene, all things that are valuable to their organizations and their jobs. Like there's people waiting for law enforcement, firefighters, dispatchers to retire so they can scoop them up. But you're not going to find what you're not looking for. You got to start looking now in your career, like how can I use this to build upon my purpose and what's next.
let's stay here for a little bit. I want us to get into Warrior's Heart. The listeners hear me talk about it all the time, but I
Yeah.
want you to tell us about what you guys are doing on a broader scale, and then specifically in Virginia. But first, let's talk more about this. Did you do some things? Because I can tell you, and this is where I give God credit again, because I did some things in the last 5 years of my career that prepared me for this moment, but I wasn't doing it on purpose. The things that I did that prepared me for 2024, I give God credit for that. God put some things into motion, and I just faithfully was
Yeah.
being present and being faithful in whatever I was currently doing. But it totally set me up for this post law enforcement gig. So, what was towards the end of your career? Were there things that you did intentionally, or that you just did because you did them, and it kind of got you ready for this?
Yeah. So some of the things I did intentionally was obviously self work. I spent a lot of time on self. I spent a lot of time on my marriage, the relationships that mattered most, and how have I contributed to where we're at? And so then that, of course, uncovers all the things that I had gone through. So, like, very intentionally processing through that, getting into therapy, going and seeking professional help, spending time and having very clear, open, honest, vulnerable, hard conversations with my beautiful bride. And then within the career field, I started doing the wellness and resiliency piece. I identified a need. I wasn't rocket science. I saw, hey, I got healthy, and then suddenly it was like I was looking around, going, man, everybody's struggling in their marriages. Everybody is drinking a little too much. We were all like doing it, and nobody was telling the other one not to do it. So when I started teaching the 6 pillars of wellness, we started talking about psychological health, mental health, physical health, kind of talking about sleep hygiene. And the course was kind of developing as we were going. It forced me to look at my own habits and how I was implementing some of these things in my own life, because it's great to stand in front of the class and go, look at all I know and all the knowledge that I have amassed and accumulated. And people go, well, this is the subject matter expert. He must do it. That's not true. Sometimes the trainer is the one who's not doing it. It's like the car mechanic with the crappy car, right? The cop with the bad kid. It's like, wait
The
a second.
overweight doctor telling you to lose 2 pounds.
Exactly. And I went, oh man, it forced me to kind of be introspective and look at how I was showing up in the world myself. So those were some of the very intentional things. And then some of the like intangible was because I stepped into teaching, which by the way, I always kind of loved public speaking. Just naturally, it was something I was good at and I enjoyed doing. But I was able to hone the skills because when you're teaching a bunch of police officers, like, man, you better bring your A game, because they're either going to embrace you or they're going to push you out of that space.
Yep.
And so it helped me perfect public speaking and being comfortable in being uncomfortable, and having hard conversations with a lot of eyes on me. And so those are some of the like intangible skills that I was able to work on, developing like little things, developing PowerPoints, learning some of the computer skills, getting better at like administrative tasks that would kind of help me. And those are like little things that you don't really think about, but they have big implications on your future. When somebody goes, hey, do you know how to do PowerPoint, Word, and Excel? It's great to be able to say, yeah, I did that, because my previous career taught me some of that through developing programs and curriculum to teach. So those were some of the things that I did, like from a professional standpoint, and then also from a personal.
So let me ask this. What rank were you when you left San Antonio Police Department?
I was a patrol officer.
I was really hoping that was your answer. And this is why I asked it. You are an executive director for
Correct.
Warriors Heart in Virginia.
Correct.
And I had a city manager in Kennewick tell me this back when I was early in my career. We were creating this leadership development program for our city. And he said, Chris, line level patrol officers would be supervisors and managers at all the other departments throughout our city.
Yeah.
You show up on scene and you are a leader. You bring calm to the chaos. People look to you as a uniformed police officer at 21 years old and they expect you to lead. And so
Yeah.
everything that you just described, you were talking about leadership and the fact that we have industries out there that are hungry to hire retired police officers and firefighters and EMS and dispatchers. Why? Because you are leaders.
Yeah.
Because you have been exercising leadership. Sometimes we don't recognize it. I don't know about you, but I discounted a lot of my knowledge, a lot of my skills. I was like, well, that's just common. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's common amongst the people we work with because we work with a whole bunch of leaders, and just recognizing the experience that you're getting and the leadership that you have to offer to so many organizations when you eventually leave law enforcement or firefighting. Because guess what? You're either going to die on the job or you're going to leave eventually. One of the two. I'm hoping you're
Yeah.
eventually going to leave.
Yeah. I think those are great points. And you may have heard this too. Like I hear this from a lot of policemen. Who's going to want to hire me? I'm just a patrol officer. And I'm like, everybody will want to hire you. I think it's important to, again, going back to the conversation we had a minute ago, it was like recognizing that this is setting you up for your purpose. This is setting you up for something bigger than you. You have to know that. You have to reframe it now so that you're looking for it. Otherwise, you retire. And then something we see a lot of suicides. I don't know what the numbers are for suicides post-career, but what I can tell you is a lot of officers leave their career fields and they don't know what to do. They don't know what direction to go. They don't know how to, basic, like find a job. Who's going to want to hire me? What am I going to do? I don't have any skills. And I'm like, yeah, you do. And again, a lot of police departments, military, I heard this the other day. I thought it was brilliant. They teach you how to put your uniform on, but they don't teach you how to take it off. Yeah. Right. And it's like, man, that is so true. But you can do it. You can start learning now. You can start doing some self-work, and you can start finding in your purpose what you love, what you're passionate about, what brings you excitement. And then when you leave, like, you have a direction to go. You don't need to be on a straight and narrow path, but at least you're kind of, you got the compass set to north. Well, I know I want to go that way. Great. See what's out there and do a little experimenting, be inventive, have fun with it. It's not the end of the world if you do something and then you don't get it right. Cool. I'm going to pivot and go on. Again, law enforcement teaches us that. How many calls did you show up to that you went, well, that escalated quickly, but I got it taken care of, right? It's teaching you about life, because that's what life is. It's call after call, problem after problem. Oops, that didn't work. Let me re-solution this, come up with something. Policemen are some of the most inventive and ingenious people I have ever met in my life. Yes. They can solve anything. Like, take those skills and apply it to yourself personally.
Yeah. Wow, brother. I'm getting pumped and just seeing. Let's get into Warrior's Heart, because that's one of the options that people have as you focus on this self-work, whether you're at 5 years and you just want to have an amazing rest of your career, whether you're at 17, whether you're at 18 and a half, where I was at, whether you're at 33, you're starting to focus on self-work, trying to heal up your brain, trying to be the best dad, husband, mom, wife, whatever roles you play. And you realize I need something more, meaning I'm doing some self-work. I have got that mental health professional counselor, but I need a higher level of help. How is Warrior's Heart solving that problem?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So Warrior's Heart, for those listeners and viewers who don't know, we are a 42-day inpatient residential treatment program. We're looking for a primary diagnosis of substance use. But the thing we know about substance use is it's what everybody kind of focuses on: the alcoholism, the drug addiction, the opioid addiction, very common, the pills, the minor injury that was turned into a pill addiction. What's underneath all that? Well, then you start to talk about things like PTS. You start to talk about things like depression, anxiety. So we know that the substance, yes, we have to treat that. So here at Warrior's Heart at both campuses, not only are we treating the substance, but we're also getting underneath and treating the co-occurring mental health disorder. Like, why did you get here? Why are you struggling? Why are you trying to numb? Why has this adaptation become your way of living? And so that's what we do here at Warrior's Heart. We treat substance use. And we do that through a number of therapeutic modalities. We have dual diagnosis clinicians as well as substance use clinicians on our campus. But something that we also do that's very unique, we offer elective time while they're here on our campuses, because it is important for people to, A, do things that are a little bit outside of maybe their comfort zone, but B, it's important to give people a variety of things to do and different ways to heal. So here in Virginia, we offer, for example, Monday through Friday, 1 to 5, they can pick and choose their electives. We ask them, don't spend all 4 hours in one elective. Try some different things. We have a very robust wood and metal shop. They can go down. We've had guys build charcuterie boards. We've had people build chess tables, where they build flags. They can do epoxy work. They can also do forge and work on some Native American art down there as well. We have an art studio where they can go paint, draw through creative expression. they can heal. They can jump in the kitchen and do cooking with chef, learn some basic cooking skills. And after they've done that a certain amount of times, they'll work with our chefs, our culinary staff, and create their own meal, and then cook the meal for the warriors and for the staff as well. They can get massages. They can go to our freaking dope gym. We have a great relationship with Rogue Fitness. Man, I got a CrossFit gym down here that'll rival any gym out there. Like, the place is absolutely incredible. They can go fishing down at the lake. We have a 26-acre lake here at our 520-acre campus. So there's a lot of things for them to do to heal from their substance use. And what I also want to encourage your listeners and your viewers is, look, you know somebody that's dealing with addiction. What I can tell you, whatever side of the fence you're on, whatever you believe, like, I'm genetically predisposed, life did this to me. Here's what we all know about addiction. It can be healed.
Yes.
Like, it can be healed
Bring
with
it.
intentional, focused work. And Warrior's Heart is, we believe, part of that solution. And by the way, we only cater to the warrior class. That's active duty military, veterans of the United States military, active, retired, former first responders. That's law enforcement, fire, EMS, dispatch, emergency healthcare workers. I had a client here not long ago. He was an air life pilot. That was his connection to the warrior class.
Yeah.
It's really, really beautiful what we're doing here. Powerful stuff.
Brother, that's a very different picture compared to the movies from the 80s where I'm in a straitjacket and it's sterile white walls and there's that awkward bleach smell throughout always. You just described a high dollar retreat center that I'm paying a lot of money to go to if I just want to go and hang out with my buddies.
Yeah. Yeah. And so here's something on our website. It says resort-like healing facility.
Yeah.
And warriors, when they come here, I say, yes, we are like a resort. Man, my place looks like a hunting and fishing lodge. It's beautiful. But I say, we ain't here to kick our feet up. We're here to get sober, and we're here to make a different choice. We refer to our program as a training program, not rehab and recovery, although that's what it is, but training. Why do we call it training? One, the word makes sense to this population, to this community. And two, that's exactly what we're doing. We are retraining ourselves to choose something different. And, I don't want to do this. This is hard. I'm like, I have Green Berets, Navy SEALs. I have guys from the SOCOM community, all walks of life, every branch, all first responders, all manners of serving. And I'm like, you did that, and now you can't work on sobriety for 42 days? I'm going to call BS. You got all the tools and everything it takes. We just happen to be the place. But you have everything is within you right here, right now, to make a choice. And sobriety, we know this. It's 24 hours at a time, man. Do the next right thing. That's what they always say in the rooms, because we are at our core a 12-step program here as well. Warriors healing warriors, man. That's our mission statement, Chris. That's what we do.
I love it. And I like you pointing out training. I first heard Tom Satterley talk about that. Him and his wife Jen came on the podcast here, or maybe I was just listening to their stuff. And I know Satterley and Spooner are buddies from just listening to them talk. But that resonates. We understand training. Training is good, especially when it's relevant, scenario based. Here's the deal: Warrior's Heart is scenario based.
Yeah.
You're stepping into some of your tough stuff that you have used alcohol or drugs to mute out. You've used alcohol or drugs to make the anxiety, the pain go away, and it works until it doesn't.
Yeah.
It works for the moment, but the problem is, if it was a true solution, it would make that stuff go away, and it doesn't. It actually amplifies it. Now I'm just talking from my experience. I'm not talking about science. I'm not talking about medical research. I am saying from my experience, being a child crime detective, dealing with a lot of death at my work as a detective, I was using alcohol to make the anxiety calm down, and it worked for the night. The problem is I was robbing myself of quality sleep. So my brain wasn't doing the natural healing that it's supposed to do during the nighttime. And when you stack up days and weeks and years of doing that, you're having a deficit. You are injuring yourself even more versus allowing your body to heal and then implementing good stress management things that have positive outcomes.
Yeah, your body's built for life. Of course, you have to deliberately focus on it. And I love what you said there about like alcohol being the solution. We do practice of the day here, where we read an excerpt out of the Big Book, and then Tom Spooner has his words underneath there, and he tells this really beautiful story of sitting with his sponsor one day, and the sponsor going, "Hey, do you have a problem with alcohol?" And he's like, "Well, no." And he goes, "You're right. You don't have a problem with alcohol. It's your solution to all your problems. And when you take away the solution to all your problems, all you're left with is your problems." Who wants that? Right? It feels ugly. It feels hard. I don't feel good enough. I feel less than. Shame and guilt. Bad, bad, bad. It's like, hey man, sit with that a little bit. Let's clear that out. Let's sit with it a little bit, and let's let our body do what it's supposed to do, what God, our creator, designed it to do. It already does it. Now allow it to.
Yes. Hey, one of the things that I know, I mean, as first responders, as military members and veterans, we look at the bottom line. What's this going to cost me? How does that process work in reference to insurances? And because the thing is I think that's going to be one of the hurdles that some people experience is, hey, I know I need this. Hey, I like this Warriors Only and Warriors Healing Warriors um, approach,
Yeah.
but I can't afford this. How does that work?
So we are not a nonprofit. We are a privately funded organization for profit. Now, what I tell people is like, don't let that discourage you at all, because we have, first off, everybody who's served in these career fields or currently serving probably has some type of benefit. Let our admissions advocates figure out what your benefits are. And if there is financially a gap, then let us help work with a nonprofit, some of our nonprofit partners like Gary Sinise, like the Avalon Alliance, like Frontline Healing, like Green Beret Foundation, like Boot Campaign, hundreds of them. There's hundreds of them. Task Force Dagger, like I could go on and on and on. Like, let's let them and our admissions advocates work through what funding might look like. But I will tell you this. People who invest a little bit of money into their own healing, statistically speaking, do better, because man, I had to pay for this. I better get it right. But we will work with our warriors to figure out how to get funding, because we understand that there are financial barriers, and we want to help overcome those.
Well, and I can say that from a client perspective. I won't disclose name, but I had one of you listeners reach out to me and need to get in, and I watched him, and I even got his permission to reach out to one of the advocates at Warriors Heart and was discussing the process for him getting in. And the person I spoke with, can't remember his name. Uh, he was amazing. He talked about the options.
Yeah.
Because this guy gave permission, we talked a little bit about specifics, and that amazing veteran got in. He sent me some pictures from some of his elective time of the work that he did, and this is someone I didn't even know,
Yeah.
right? Other than me talking about it here on the podcast, and I can just tell you from a client's perspective, from listening to him and watching his journey, that Warrior's Heart wants to help you, and
Yeah.
they're going to do whatever they can to to make this possible. And here's the deal, Mike. I like what you said. Here's the deal: we have to invest in ourselves. We have to invest in ourselves with the time that we spend. I would say that first and foremost, the time that you protect to care for yourself is probably the biggest. The talents that you have that you bring to the table to invest in yourself is big. And then our treasures. We are us investing financially into our own well-being, whether that be eating a cleaner diet, whether that be in paying for a mental health professional, whether that be in paying for massages, whether that be checking yourself into a substance abuse center and saying, you know what, this is going to cost me this amount of money now, but the payoff. the payoff is I'm going to be healthier, I'm going to be happier, and now I'm going to be ready to go out there and live the rest of my life.
Yeah. A confident, healthy, sober warrior. Like that's what we want you to lead as. Absolutely. I'm a big believer in self-help and paying for a class, paying for a certificate, finding something that'll teach you a little bit more about who you are. And something that I also want to share with your listeners and your viewers, because I like what you just brought up. And it's the three lies that we tell ourselves. One, you are what you do, right? You're not what you do. You're so much more. You have a purpose-driven life. Clear out all the things, all the barriers, and see what that is. The second lie is you are what others say you are. Not true. You are not what others say you are, and the narratives and the things people told you when you were a kid, when you were an adult, you're not good enough. You'll never get there. How can you even think that? Wow, that seems like too much. And then the last lie is your best days are behind you. I believe, much like you experienced and I've experienced, that like the journey is just beginning, man. Like I'm just getting started. It is, but you get in a room with a bunch of policemen and they're all talking about the good old days, right? And the way things used to be. And it's like, wait a second, man, what about what's out there ahead that I can't see yet? How do I get there? Because that seems pretty interesting and exciting. Your best days are ahead of you. They are not behind you. It was something you went through, something you did, but man, there's something out there bigger than you that you're just not seeing yet. And I hope people who are struggling are able to get into treatment, clear that out, and they can start to redefine who they are and find their purpose and start digging deep, you know?
I love that. I mean, what I heard you talking about there was that identity piece, the fact that, again, as young men and women who get into these type of professions, we oftentimes connect our identity with what we do. And it's okay to have pride in what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, be proud of these jobs, military and first responder jobs, man. We need these great heroes out doing it. And it's not who you are.
No.
It's not who you are.
Not at all. Fathers, husbands, mothers, sisters, brothers. I mean, all the identities you wear that are like secondary to this uniform. My wife used to tell me, "Yeah, go put on your costume," because it was like I put that uniform on, and yeah, I thought I was somebody else, and I literally became someone else. And I was like, man, I got a wife and kids and a whole life back there that don't care about my uniform.
Yeah.
They're looking for me to just show up, be present. Yeah.
Brother, I think that's a great way for us to end. Just show up and be present. Hey, Mike, for folks that hadn't heard your voice before, what are the best ways for them to connect with you?
People can go to our website, warriorsheart.com. I encourage everybody to take a look at our website, and they can see our bios and my whys, a little bit about each one of the staff members. There's a Bandera website. There's as well a Virginia website. I don't have a big social media platform, but I do have LinkedIn. If people want to go to LinkedIn and look me up, I'm there as well. I post a little here and there. That's how you and I have connected. And although now we have each other's numbers, but yeah, people can email me as well. I got no problem. Somebody needs help. They're struggling. They're trying to find resources away. Like, reach out to me.
Love it. Well, for the listeners, I'm going to make that real easy. The website, Warriors Heart's phone number, and Mike's LinkedIn profile will be down in the show notes. Mike, time is my greatest commodity. I can't make more of this stuff, and you've given me an awful lot of yours. Thank you, brother.
It's my pleasure.
Have a great day.
You too.
Wow, folks, what did you think about Mike and my conversation? Man, the power in some of these stories, not just in his story in reference to the change that the job had on his personal life, his family life, but also the change that it's had on other people's lives, other people that he considers brothers and sisters and friends. And I love to hear the mission that he's on now in helping other people in that warrior class. I think it's absolutely amazing work that he's doing, and wow, I can tell you that for the people that have been listening for a while, you know that me and my family have gone through a lot in the last couple months in losing one of my daughters, and Mike has been very intentional about reaching out to me and checking in on me, making sure that I'm okay. So I just appreciate him very much, as well as many of you that have also reached out to me. Hey folks, Jaimie and I want to hear from you. How are we doing here on the podcast? There's a few different ways for you to communicate back to us. First and foremost, please follow us on whatever podcast platform you're consuming this on. That will cause the next episode to pop up in your dashboard. You can also rate and review us if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. There's 5 stars waiting on the main page. We'd really appreciate a 5-star rating and maybe even a review. That will cause other people to hear about the podcast. That will make it more viewable for other people that aren't currently listening. But you've heard me say it, folks. Those stars are your stars. They're not my stars. So unless I've earned 5 stars, I want you to keep them. Instead, shoot me an email at chris@gravityct.com. Let us know how to make it better. Future Marriage Monday topics or guests for me to interview. Folks, we only get to live this life once. Let's go out and take care of the people in our tribes. Take care of each other. God bless.